Well, I was hoping to get back to this Viglen Omnino Pentium 4 restoration quite quickly with some benchmarks and gameplay, but I ran into all sorts of problems with colour issues on this display, which I've had to sort out, and it's taken a bit of fiddling. But finally, here we are. We'll get some benchmarks, gameplay, and see how this thing performs. I'm sure this was working okay at some point, but I did notice when I was making the first video on this machine that there was a sort of green-blue tinge to the video output. I thought it was just going to be a case of doing some colour management and getting some software on there. I tried to install a video control panel, but I needed Windows XP Service Pack 3, which I didn't have to hand, so I went off and got that, and it became apparent looking at that the entire red channel was missing from this picture, so I needed to sort that out. I ran 3D Mark 2003 just to give you an idea of just how green and horrible this thing looked, and definitely needs fixing before I can take this any further. So, to my possibly not technically expert eyes, this can only be one of two things. It can either be the monitor or it can be the cable. So, looking at the monitor first, I thought about whipping a panel out of one of my 17-inch monitors and sticking it in here to see if that proved anything. I thought that was a bit excessive, and then I figured out, because I've got some of these little patch connector cables that you use for sort of electronics breadboard experiments, that if they actually plug quite nicely into the proprietary end of this cable, and they also leave the female end at the other end, which plugs nicely into a VGA cable. So I thought I can actually extend this cable with a standard VGA cable and test it out using another monitor instead of this one, and if that monitor also displays the same problem, that excludes the problem being to do with this panel or the logic board on the back of it, and it just basically proves that it would be the cable. But I thought this would be the easiest thing to do first rather than start hacking up cables and stuff like that. And yes indeed, it was still a green screen. And then it was just a case of whipping out the multimeter and just checking end-to-end continuity for each of the pins in turn. So I'm not sure if there's any colour coding standard for wiring in a VGA cable, but it didn't seem, I would expect the red cable to be in the red channel, but that was fine. And eventually I worked out it was the pink cable, which when I looked at a pin out for a VGA cable, it is indeed the red channel, which is effectively the number one pin at the top left, with the wide bit at the top. There's a couple of ways I could have fixed this cable. I could have bought a new D-sub, 15-pin D-sub header and just soldered things on. I could take an existing VGA cable and just chop one end of it and solder that in. And I've even seen on companies like RS, they'll sell you a VGA cable that only has a D-sub at one end and just bare cables at the other. And that cable is even colour coordinated the same as this proprietary connector, so I'm kind of thinking that might be the way I go, so I might order one of those. In the meantime, just for a quick and dirty fix, I'm just going to run a patch cable down the outside to replace the red cable altogether, or the pink red channel cable. So I'm just going to cut into the insulation at either end a little bit and splice a new cable onto it, and I'll just wrap it all up with electrician's tape just to keep it in place and see if we can get a picture going and sort it out more permanently at a later date. So yeah, just cut into these cables at either end a little bit, scraped it down to the core, bit of flux, bit of solder, and basically just created a patch wire running all the way down the outside of the cable. Checked the continuity, so we've now got continuity on the red channel, and just wrapped it up with a bit of tape. Not the prettiest thing in the world, it'll do for now, and like I said, I'll sort it out at some point in the future. Now for the moment of truth, let's hook this thing up and see if it works. I just did a quick and dirty put together of the machine, just everything's kind of bodged together and held in by single screws just to get it in. It's a bit of a pain. This isn't a machine where you can just have the motherboard outside of the machine. It has to be on the back of the monitor, which covers the connector from the VGA cable, and it's all a bit of a pain in the ass to work on, but let's give it a go and see what happens. So what happened? Absolutely nothing. I could hear the machine booting up, I could hear hard disk activity, nothing on the screen, and I was in despair, and I sat there and sort of looked at it for a few minutes, and then suddenly a realization came to me that if you are going to spend all this time fixing up a VGA cable, you should not be so fucking stupid as to forget to plug it into the monitor. Sorted. Let's try it again. So the cable's being plugged in now, but still nothing. And then it kind of dawned on me that because this thing's got an on-off switch just for the monitor on the front bezel, that maybe this monitor was in a turned off state anyway. So I quickly popped that on, pushed the button, and then check it. It works. Thank fuck for that. Okay, so we're into there, and straight away I can see the Windows Defender icon on the sys trays red, which is a good sign. So we can open up NVIDIA Control Panel and have a look at the test palette that we've got there, and indeed it's showing all the colors you kind of expect it to. So that's cool, everything's looking good. And as a last test, we can go into that WordPad document that I had before where the text was not allowing you to change it to red and it wasn't showing the full palette of colors. And we've got everything now and we can change it to red. So yeah, looking good. And indeed, this monitor looks pretty sharp and pretty snappy, I've got to say. I don't know whether it's just because there's a sheet of proper glass over the front of the LCD panel. It's horribly reflective, so you can't really have any light behind you. But it does look sharp and vibrant and looks like it might be a nice monitor to use. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the best retro nut of them all? It's me! Stop looking at yourself in that shiny glass. Onwards. All that we need to do now is put this thing back together and then we can run some stuff. So we're good to go, and I think 3D Mark 2003 is a good place to start because I'm kind of thinking that really this is a machine that's going to be kind of 2001 to 2005, 2006 XP. I don't think you're going to be pushing it into the last days of XP up in 2007, 2008. Though it depends on what kind of game, but we'll see how it fares with this. And all the way through, it's looking pretty good on 2003. The frame rates are all high. The CPU test's done fairly well. I just set this thing to default. There's no anti-aliasing on here because I can fiddle with that as games require, but I think this looks pretty damn good and bodes well for maybe gaming up to sort of 2004. And then for a few more synthetic benchmarks, I pushed it a bit further. We were into 3D Mark 2005 and 3D Mark 2006, but as you kind of expect, the frame rates got slower and slower and slower, and I think that playing intensive games, judging by 3D Mark 2006, might be a bit challenging for this card, though obviously knocking down the resolution and the detail probably make a lot of things playable. But to be honest, I think the kind of games that I'm probably going to be playing on these machines aren't going to be that demanding, and it's really going to be a light gaming machine because it's fairly recent history for me, so just a bit of fun. And as I said, it's kind of fairly recent, or I think of it as recent history, this kind of era of gaming. And I still have quite a few of my XP era games kicking around upstairs in the games room, and I bought a few of them down here. I only wish I could say the same for my 90s DOS and Windows 95 games, but I've got a few of these kicking around, and there are indeed some classics here. So here's a selection that I could have a go at on this machine. We've got Medieval Total War. I played both the first one and this one extensively and enjoyed them both thoroughly. Then there's Medal of Honor Allied Assault, my first experience of what has become the ubiquitous cover shooter. Dungeon Siege, absolute classic action RPG. Battle of Middle-earth, one of my all-time favourite games, and its sequel, which I wasn't so keen on, but I have recently acquired the add-on for this, which is something that I haven't played, and I'm very much looking forward to giving that a go on this machine. So all we need to do now is get a couple of these installed. I think we'll have a look at Medal of Honor and Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth, just to get a bit of variety with a fast-paced first-person shooter slightly earlier. I think it was 2002 that came out. And Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth, which is kind of more 2005 game, a bit more graphic fidelity, and we'll see how they look.
In the land of Mordor, in the fires of Mount Doom, the Dark Lord Sauron forged in secret a master ring. And into this ring he poured his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all life.
The farm is ready!
This brings it all flooding back. I loved this game, absolutely loved it. I loved the films, and this really captured the atmosphere of the films because it had a lot of the music and the voices all from the real actors and the film itself. So it was a very atmospheric thing for me. I really enjoyed the gameplay, and in fact I could have spent the rest of the afternoon playing this quite merrily. So I'm really looking forward to giving this a complete playthrough again on this new machine. So right now I'm just going to kamikaze this orc camp, and then we'll have a look at Medal of Honor.
Pay attention, and you might even stand a chance on the battlefield. First, I want you to use your eyes to look at each of the...
So Medal of Honor Allied Assault was a game that I was really excited when it came out, primarily because I was a big fan of the Steven Spielberg war stuff that was kicking around at the time. Saving Private Ryan was an awesome movie, and I really enjoyed Band of Brothers, and this game also had some input from Spielberg himself and very much set out to capture that kind of vibe that those TV programs and films had. So I got it. I wasn't thoroughly impressed by it, mostly because I'm not really a first-person shooter kind of guy. I never actually played it all the way through, and I very quickly fell into the trap of the online maps, and I think this may have been one of the very first games to have that recipe that we're all very familiar with now in the likes of Call of Duty and Battlefield, of having a selection of maps and two teams thugging it out, hiding behind walls, and the classic cover shooter online experience was born. And I did thoroughly enjoy that at the time, though it's not my thing at all these days, so I think I would enjoy now giving this a run through in its story mode. I think that pretty much wraps it up for this video. It's been a bit of an up and down experience with this machine, and it's taken a lot longer than I thought it was going to, especially given that the internals are all in pretty good shape when I got it. It just needed a few bits and pieces. The exterior is buffed up quite well, I think, and it looks pretty smart. I like the screen now that it's working properly. It looks sharp and snappy and colourful, and I'm looking forward to going through my XP games and having a bit of a flashback to that period in time. So as always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you consider giving me a thumbs up or subscribing if you did, and thank you to those who have already subscribed, and I hope to provide you with more exciting retro content in the future. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.